All right, Becky, you gotta finish making those sandwiches. The train will be here any minute. That's the train. Come on, let's go.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Dennison Railroad Depot Museum, and today we're going to be talking all about our canteen history. Now, canteens are not the containers that can hold water. We're going to be talking about how they served soldiers during World War II. You see, the armed services had a huge logistical problem. Number one is, how were they going to be able to get all these soldiers across country during World War II? Well, they partnered with the railroads to make this happen. Also, how were they going to be able to feed all the soldiers? Not only there were not enough dining cars on the railroad, nor were there enough restaurants or time along the way to feed all these soldiers. So trackside canteens popped up all over the place. Ohio had the most with 12, more than any other state, so go Ohio. And Dennison had the third largest canteen in the United States, the largest being in North Platte, Nebraska, the second being the New York Stage Door Canteen in New York City. So to give you an idea of what it was like to be a soldier at that time, I want everyone who's watching the video to close your eyes. Okay, everybody close your eyes, keep them nice and tight, no peeking. Now I want you to imagine that you're a soldier, you're dressed in uniform, that you are on a train, you're sitting around a whole bunch of people you don't know, you're leaving home for the first time, you have no money in your pocket, you don't know where your next meal is coming from, you're scared, you're frightened, you're going off to war. War is a very scary thing. Now, keeping your eyes closed, think about that fear. Think about how scared and afraid those soldiers were and how hungry you are. Now I want you to think about your hometown. Imagine it, the best parts about your hometown. And I want you to think about your mother, your sister, your grandmother, gentlemen, your girlfriends, or your wives. And they're handing you a free sandwich, a free cup of coffee, an apple, a donut, holding onto your hand and telling you everything's going to be okay. Now I want you to open your eyes. So the feelings you had when I first started talking about it was that you felt very scared, afraid, alone. Again, you were on a hot, crowded troop train. There were 700 other soldiers on that train with you. 700, imagine that. People you don't know. Maybe one of your neighbors, but that was about it. You were leaving home for the first time, going to a country you never heard of, because they didn't travel back then like we do today. They didn't. People did not have cars as much, people did not go by airplane as much, so how they traveled was by train, and they didn't go very many places. So you imagine being those things and pulling into this tiny little town that reminds you of your own hometown, where there's a woman who looks like your grandmother or your mother or your sister or your girlfriend or wife, and they're handing you free food and telling you everything's going to be okay, made a huge impact on the soldiers' lives. The soldiers themselves actually nicknamed Dennison Dreamsville, USA, and there's two theories to this. One of those is what I just told you, that when you were a soldier and you were afraid and you were hungry and you were stopping in this tiny little town, that it was like a dream to them. The other theory is that in 1939, Glenn Miller and his orchestra created the song Dreamsville, Ohio. And in the song, it talks about this idyllic little town that's separated from all the troubles of the war. And it talks about how perfect that little town is. One of the reasons we think that the soldiers picked up on that song and they decided to nickname Dennison, Ohio, Dreamsville, USA. Now, what I'm standing here is probably the most important artifact that we have on our collection, and it is a sandwich bag from the canteen, and it was donated to us during the 50th anniversary of World War II. It was brought back to the museum. Now, imagine that. This is a wax paper bag. It is the original. Imagine being a soldier, grabbing this bag, coming into Dennison, and then going overseas, was stationed in France, kept it the entire length of the war, and then another 50 years after the war. And it's in pretty good condition for being that old, especially since it's wax paper. There is no other testament to how powerful the canteen is other than this sandwich bag right here. This tells our story. Here in Dennison, we served over 1.3 million soldiers. That is 13% of all armed services. Now, remember, this was the time of rationing. You could not get things like you can today. You can't just go to the store then and buy a bag of flour. Everything was rationed. So if you didn't have enough ration stamps for that week, then you couldn't go to the store and get flour or sugar. It's funny, we have all sorts of stories from the canteen about how this one person who worked at the canteen had lots of kids, so they had extra sugar rations. So she was able to make icing for cupcakes. Now think about that. Icing for cupcakes. Today, we just go to the shelf and buy Pillsbury, right? Very different then. Everybody came together. It was an 8-county-wide service here in Tuscarawas County. So if that's not something you knew, you should be proud of Tuscarawas County in Ohio. Again, not only because we had the largest here in the state, but we also had more than any other state. One of the stories we also like to talk about are the hands, okay? All the hands. They were passing out so many sandwiches and so much coffee. You can imagine, because this was a water stop, since we're halfway between Columbus and Pittsburgh, that they had to stop here at the canteen to pick up water. They only stopped long enough to do that. So the soldiers had a very short amount of time to get off the train, get some food, and get back on. Again, 700 people on a train. It's a lot of people to feed. So you can imagine that the ladies always talk about how that they would pass out so many sandwiches and so much coffee, they never actually looked at anyone's faces. They could tell you by their hands how many people they had, but by their faces they couldn't tell. One lady talks about how that her own husband could have been standing in front of her and she never would have known because all they looked at were hands. I hope you enjoyed the story of the canteen today. It's a very powerful story, and when we're out of quarantine, I truly hope that you come and see us and get to see this rare artifact. Thank you.